So the release of that final piece of the state capture report represents a critical step towards some sort of national reckoning, says Corruption Watch. But it urges that the release be followed by concrete processes that set in motion appropriate investigations by law enforcement agencies. It's a call many in South Africa are hopeful will be loud and effective as the country weighs the costs of the time and money spent. Not only that, Corruption Watch hopes that prosecutions are secured and successful, and that money stolen could be recouped. Kavisha Pillay, Corruption Watch's Head of Stakeholder Relations and Campaign, joins me now. Good evening and welcome. You'd like to see investigations kick off next. You know, the report covers a range of areas. We hear that law enforcement is operationally constrained. Where do you think these investigations must start?
Well, unfortunately, Iman, we don't have the luxury of just prioritizing particular area. We've seen how vital and key areas of how corruption has invaded sort of key public institutions, from our SOEs to law enforcement agencies and across the board. So unfortunately, we don't think that, you know, at this point that there's one specific institution that needs to be prioritized. But we do know that law enforcement agencies have their work cut out for them in terms of going after those who've been implicated and rooting out corruption from those institutions. So in a context where among politicians and some of those implicated, you know, there are those who decry the quality of the report and the time and the expense of it, what makes you as Corruption Watch believe that this is one of the most significant commissions the country has ever seen? It was a very important process for us. You know, state capture riddled our public service, and we needed to have some form of accountability. And I think this is the first part in that. For too many years, there's been impunity, there's been no justice. People who've engaged in corruption got away with it. And this process was the start of something where we were finally able to hear and understand as the public what was going on. It was no longer just, you know, mere allegations that appeared on the SABC or, you know, in different media publications. People came forward with evidence. So it was important for us as the public to understand what was going on in the state. Now we're at a point where I think, you know, we're at the end of one era and we're at, you know, starting a new chapter, and this has to be the chapter of accountability. You know, yes, there's been a lot of time, there's been a lot of money, but it hasn't been fruitless. And, you know, our message to politicians, to the law enforcement agencies is that now they have nowhere to hide. I mean, all of the evidence, all of the information is out there. They have to act on it. Parliament has to follow those recommendations. You know, the executive, the president, you know, has to implement these recommendations because the public is watching, and it can't just be, you know, information that's on, you know, in this large volumes of paper that then collects dust. We want to see action on this. So, you know, it is one part in a bigger, you know, story, and all of the hard work, I think, you know, starts now.
As you were talking there, we were playing some overlay of Lucky Montana, former PRASA CEO. He was on the program yesterday pushing back against some of the findings and saying that there's a lot, you know, that he wanted to say to the commission, which he didn't. But the plan is to take potentially this, you know, the findings insofar as he and PRASA are concerned upon review. And there seems to be those signs of rumbling as well amongst other people who've been implicated and named. Do you not think then that we are in for a longer battle around accountability and holding people or finding people culpable, that it might be a bit too early to say that this has been a successful outcome for the commission?
100%. I mean, you know, these politicians and individuals who've been implicated will obviously go the Stalingrad approach because they don't want to face consequences for their actions. So it's not going to be something, we're not going to see accountability and justice overnight. But whilst people are, you know, taking certain parts and sections of the report under review, there are also, you know, other recommendations to other parts of the state, you know, that will essentially help to close the loopholes for corruption and will help to build, you know, an effective and proper public service. There was recommendations to Parliament, of which, you know, Corruption Watch made a submission, and our recommendations found our way through into the final report about appointments to key institutions. and what should happen there to prevent those institutions from being captured. Judge Zondo has recommended the same or similar model that what we've suggested for the appointments of SOEs. So there is a lot that can be done. There's a lot in this report. And whilst we do know that there will be individuals who will take the Stalingrad approach to avoid accountability, I think we also need to see where the other opportunities are right now in this report from those recommendations and make sure that those recommendations are in fact implemented.
So the wheels of justice, we are led to believe, are already turning with the arrest of Rajesh and Atul Gupta in Dubai. The NPA says it is working tirelessly to finalize the extradition treaty between our country and authorities in the UAE. How big a psychological boon would it be to see them in South Africa standing trial?
I think it would be huge. It's not just about Rajesh and Atul Gupta. I think anybody who's been implicated in corruption, if they face justice, if they're held accountable, I think it's big for us because it means that, we're starting to say as a country that corruption is not a culture, it's not endemic. There's no impunity, whether you're, engaging in large scale state capture or just participating in petty bribery, it's not going to be tolerated. And I think that is going to be really important. That's a really important turning point for us as a country, because for far too long, we've seen all of these big players get away with it. And that's what's allowed, at least from our perspective at Corruption Watch, for this culture of corruption to emerge.
Okay. So, you talk about big players. You saw the rebuke the state president receives in the report for his failure to act when he first heard about interference around state capture, and that he didn't do enough to stop the theft of billions of dollars, or rands and dollars effectively, of taxpayer funds. Your views on whether the Chief Justice Zondo could have gone further in his censure?
I think so. I think the Chief Justice could have gone further in his censure, but, more than the Chief Justice pointing out what has already been in the public domain and what a lot of people have, a lot of the public have known and discussed for years, I think the president is facing a crisis of his own credibility right now. The role that he played in preventing, corruption from happening, as well as the new scandals that have emerged. Our President Ramaphosa came in on the anti-corruption ticket. These findings from Zondo and the censure from Zondo doesn't fit well for this persona that he's created of being the corruption fighter. Obviously, also with the recent allegations against him. So yes, I think the Judge Zondo could have gone further, but I think that just in terms of public credibility, President Ramaphosa unfortunately does not enjoy public confidence right now.
Right.
And even if those recommendations were a bit more serious, I think public confidence in him is really low. And
Thanks. Thank you so much. That was Kavisha Pillay, Corruption Watch's Head of Stakeholder Relations and Campaign.